Dear besties, this is your pod producer, Jayne, dropping in to give you a few key notes about today's episode. You may have noticed that I just started that with Dear Besties, and that might be because we talk about journaling a bit in this episode. I promise you, you don't have to start a journal with Dear Diary XOXO. You can if you want to. That's what I thought all journaling was. I have learnt a lot from this episode, and I'm really excited for you all to get into it too. But before we do, please note that this episode centers around discussions of suicide and a suicide attempt. There's also a brief mention of the loss of a baby. Please take care while listening and skip this one if the topics aren't right for you today. There is no judgment here, besties. We completely understand. If you do find that you listen to the episode and something has been confronting, please remember you are not alone. We've listed a wide range of resources and services in the show notes, and we will continue to be here as your ADHD besties week after week, unless we're on a break, to be your besties throughout all of the ups and downs of life. The last thing that I will say is that I met Sarah in a random podcast studio in Melbourne to record this. We both live in regional Victorian towns, so we had to meet in the middle. I may or may not have had a completely ADHD moment and forgotten to eat. So there may be times where you hear my tummy grumble. You also may hear a bit of a weak voice from me as I'm coming off the dreaded winter lurgies when we recorded this. But it's such a powerful, real and meaningful chat that I had with Sarah, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So dive in, besties, and as always, stay safe. Hello, and welcome to FM Fish, a very special episode. You have got your solo host again today, Jayne Girton, but I am joined in a pod studio by the wonderful Sarah Rosse. Welcome.
Thank you, Jayne.
I can't wait to get into it. But first of all, I will just welcome our besties in and say this podcast is for all things neurodivergent. We are here to talk about school, life, work, home, relationships, whatever it might be, from a bestie's perspective. We are not a medical podcast. We are not a therapy podcast. Please don't come to us for those things. But we are here to talk about everything we want to hear about from a bestie's perspective. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're old here, welcome back, and we love you, and thanks for being a bestie. Before we get into it further, I would like to say, if you're listening, do us a favor, hit the follow and like button. We want to grow our besties followership. We want our neurokin around us. So follow us, like us, share us, whatever it is, whatever platform you're on. It makes a huge difference. And I'm going to stop being desperate now. Let's start talking. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming this far. I'm really glad you can make it.
Thank you. And thank you for coming this far to meet me.
Oh, always. It's my joy. Now, I have read your book and I know some of your story, but I would love for you to share for all our besties out there how you came to be here and what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. So, I guess just generally, I've worked in the human services industry, coming up 30 years next year in disability. So I've got quite a lot of experience in that way. But what's led me to come here, I guess, is that I've recently published my very first book,
Congrats.
which is very exciting. Thank you. And I'm so pleased that you've read it. It's a memoir. So largely a story about how I have supported and cared for my son who had a mental health crisis back in 2023 and sort of really everything that came following that. So it's a book about my experience of supporting him and all of the questions that arose for me. So kind of woke up one day and the world was different.
Yeah.
You know, the very next day. And from there, all of these questions started coming. You know, it sort of rocked my world, I guess. Who was I? Am I the person I thought I was? Am I the mum that I thought I was? So it's taken a couple of years, but I've really worked through a lot of that. And yeah, I've sort of used journaling and incidentally writing a book to get to this point. And it's a shame that it's taken me to write a book to get to meet you. But yeah, so great to chat about it today.
Now, I don't want to take you back to the incident in detail or anything like that, but I would like to take you back to potentially that feeling around the days after. So for our listeners out there who haven't read your book, it's called So Who Are You Anyway? Written by Sarah Rosse, our beautiful guest today. And it centralizes around your 16-year-old.
He was at the time, yes.
Yeah, 16 at the time, who attempted suicide. And this is not to go through the details of what happened or anything like that, but I would love to know from your perspective as a parent. I can't imagine. I've talked to parents who've been through similar experiences, but I can't imagine being that person in the days afterwards. Like, what does it look like for you, or what did it look like from a day-to-day perspective of supporting your family, your community, and also yourself through that?
And not to talk about the event itself, but it kind of, my response kind of started there, I guess, in a way, because, and others might respond, relate to this, but it felt like I was looking over myself, almost watching myself move through those days, from the point of the incident happening and being at the hospital. I really kind of felt like I was watching myself. Like, I really couldn't believe what was happening. But the next days, you kind of just have to keep getting up and showing that life goes on in some ways. My youngest son had to go to school, my husband went to work, and I stayed at home with my son and followed up lots and lots of appointments. Lots of advocacy, I suppose, in a way too, because you're waiting for that call to come from the mental health service that never actually came. So I guess to answer your question, it was a lot of sitting around wondering what next. I guess I'm lucky I've got that strong advocacy skill set, which helped a lot in those days, I think. But it was a lot of, sort of disbelief, sort of trying to make sense of something which I still don't really make sense of itself. And then how to take the next steps, what needs to happen next. And of course, supporting my son as well in the practicalities of day-to-day life after that as well.
Oh my gosh, I like I said, I can't imagine how hard that would be. And so many people, I think, could relate to that feeling of being outside your own body and looking at what's happening, because I know there have been times where I have felt that about things that have happened in my life, where you just go, I feel completely out of control, and everything I knew is no longer the same.
Yeah, and while you feel out of control, you have to pretend, almost pretend that you are, to keep functioning, keep the household, working. And, my workplace was great. I did take a couple of days off there, but just pretending that everything's just the same as much as you can for everybody else as well.
Hate to say the word, but I'm going to say it because we are a neurodiverse podcast, but a little bit of masking had to happen there.
A lot
of masking. All right, we will come back to the neurodiverse aspect that I know comes up. But I do want to ask you, you mentioned journaling, and I know in the book itself, which I have read, and it's beautiful, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
The Kintsugi theory, practice?
Principle.
Yeah. Could you give us a little overview of what that is?
Yeah, so it's a Japanese term, basically taken from the principle of where they take broken china or broken pottery, for example, and they piece it back together using gold. And the principle is that, we're all broken, like the piece of pottery or whatever it might be. And once we're pieced back together with gold, that piece becomes much more valuable than it ever was before. So I kind of love that principle, but I volunteer for an organisation called Kintsugi Heroes, which was a really good inspiration, but a really lovely analogy to use throughout the book as well, because I was really kind of really ashamed to talk about what had happened to start with, and I felt really broken within myself. So being able to piece it together and use journaling to do that sort of resonated with me throughout the book as well.
And I've seen Kintsugi things before. They're so beautiful. I love that concept of perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
I think that is the best way to describe
anyone
neurosparkly, but also anyone who's gone through anything. You just mentioned that you felt shame around this, and that's not an uncommon feeling. I can assure you and everyone that's listening out there, it is so common to feel shame after anything around suicide, and it's such a taboo topic.
Yeah.
So I would love to know from your perspective, you found journaling and you got into journaling and it helped you process and move through things. What changed in your life or the way you were thinking about things that took it from I'm using journaling to get my feelings out and to process things to this, I feel now has to be a book that I share with the world?
So I always have sort of kept journaling in some respects. So what I call in the book, like stopping the blur each day, writing a couple of things down that have happened during the day, because I often would use that, go back and I do scrapbooking and stuff. So use that as kind of,
I love scrapbooking.
Kind of use that as a bit of a prompt for memories and things like that. But I guess as the years sort of went on, I went back and reflected on some of the things that I was writing about. And I had noticed that over time, my writing changed from just jotting down, things to remember in the day to sort of more processing feelings. I'm feeling this way because of this, or I did this because I felt like that. So it was kind of getting a little bit deeper. And then I went to the Gippsland Writers Festival last August, and I just listened to so many authors talk about their stories, and I thought, there might be something in this. I had always wanted to be a writer, but then I grew up and, kind of forgot about it. But I thought, yeah, maybe the story, now that I'd had a couple of years to process it and work through it, could maybe help somebody else. And that's when I started writing, not really knowing if it would be published.
And now here you are.
I know.
With a full-on book.
I can't believe it.
It's so exciting.
Yeah. But I've had really great feedback and kindly from you as well, but that it actually has helped people already. So I kind of feel like my job is done with the book as well. So it's really great.
It's incredible. And I know I read it, and like I said, I haven't been through the same experience, but I could relate through your words to a lot of the things that you're writing or feeling.
Yeah.
And it really, for me, kind of brought home that whilst this horrible incident happened, the perfectly imperfect rebuilding afterwards is an experience that so many of us go through in different ways. So for you, did this experience help you reframe your feelings around like the shame that you had felt? Is that something you'd already processed, or was this how you worked through it?
I think probably all of that. Initially, and I just want to be clear, I wasn't shameful about my son or what had happened. It was my own feelings about, now this is part of my story. I really felt that people would look at me and go, oh my gosh, what a terrible mother. How could you ever have let this happen? And I think through journaling and incidentally writing the book, I realized that it's not my fault. It's not actually anyone's fault. Mental ill health is an illness, and it's no one's fault. So I didn't actually talk to anyone about it for a long, long time. So I sort of was holding all of that myself. So I do think writing sort of helped get that out. And now I'm at a point where I want to talk about it. I want people to feel comfortable sharing their stories and knowing there is absolutely nothing to be shameful about. But I did feel like that for a very long time. So I think in the early days, journaling or jotting things down was really just to sort of get things out of my head, free up a bit of space probably. And then, yes, incidentally, it's helped me really get to the point where I want to share the story with others and talk about it. Because, yeah, it's absolutely needs to be talked about.
I hard agree.
Yes.
And I mean, the shame feeling, like, I appreciate that you clearly articulated it's not about the act or your son, and all you have is care and love for your son. I can tell that by reading the book. But I know I've been through experiences around suicide, and there have been times where I have felt shame about certain things where I think it's just one of those awful things that comes from something that changes everything.
Yeah.
Is all this question of what could I have done?
Yeah.
What did
absolutely.
I miss? Is this my fault? People will blame, all those kind of things. And I did want to specifically ask about, there's one part in the book where you mentioned, and I did take notes because I'm a nerd and I can't remember things. You wrote really powerful about siblings as the forgotten family members in a mental health crisis. I feel that, and I have felt that before, and I think that's incredibly hard to navigate. So what do you think someone could do practically to try and, bridge that gap between the forgotten family members who want to help and are feeling some of that shame themselves and some of that angst, to make it a little bit easier for everyone as a unit?
I think communication is key, and I didn't do that well. I think I was sort of so focused on, obviously, my son as the patient, if you like, and I was so in my head about trying to work out what's the next step, what do I need to do, who do I need to speak to, that I probably didn't really relate to my younger son very well in that environment. So my advice would probably be, if you can carve some time out just to spend with that person, probably try and explain what has happened to them in an age-appropriate way. I think that incidentally happened. I don't know, I probably have to ask him, but probably...
I can't imagine that would have been easy either.
No, and I've tried to talk about it since, and kids are just like, yeah, whatever. But I'm really mindful that I probably should have focused on that a little bit more. Hence why I sort of included it in the book. I think there's some key ways to help siblings, particularly if they're younger as well and maybe don't understand what's happened, but they certainly feel the atmosphere in the home, or they're very intuitive around what's happened. So there's lots of ways you can communicate with them. It could be through drawing, it could be through, take them out for a milkshake and have a chat. Yeah, I just wish I'd done that better, I think.
I mean, it's hard to know when you're just looking at what's the next best step.
Yeah, exactly. Really, hour by hour sometimes.
All right, so I would love to dive a bit deeper into the neurodiversity aspect of your story and what's happened and what's happening. But before I do, I'm sure you're very aware of what neurodiversity means and all of that, but I'd like to give a little bit of a refresher for our besties out there that neurodiversity is an umbrella term, and it's really a sociological construct. It is not a medical terminology for a deficit or diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst those things are critically important if you have something that can be diagnosed medically, we are talking about neurodiversity from the perspective of the sociological aspect, where you have different sensory and cognitive requirements. And that may potentially mean you need different things. So I know that the son did receive a diagnosis of a neurodiversity throughout this journey, and I would like to come back to that. But for now, I just want to talk about, in the book, it's so clearly delineated as like the day after and the immediate days after and things like that. Everything changed for you, and all of your sons and even your needs changed, because no longer could it just be the same BAU.
Yeah.
It was cognitive and sensory changes to meet the needs of your son. So how did you go in balancing not just like watching over him and making sure it's fine, but learning and changing and adapting life to these new sensory or cognitive needs? Because mental health does fall under this banner. It's contested in some ways, but anxiety and depression are very strongly comorbid with a lot of neurodiverse conditions, and they are also considered neurodiversities themselves, or neurodiverse conditions themselves, because of the way that it changes what we need.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's never been explained to me that way, but it totally makes sense. And I didn't know at the time that there was a strong correlation between what came later as an ADHD diagnosis and anxiety and depression. The diagnosis by the GP at the time was very transactional. So it was really difficult to know. I sort of had to draw on my experience working in the disability field, which again, I've learnt so much more even after working in that field. And I think when it's in your own home, it's very different as to how you might advise a client or something like that.
And even pick up on it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And look, my younger son had been diagnosed with ADHD at the time. And my older son, through COVID, missed a lot of school and so on. So I had always asked questions of the teachers, but it was always like, well, if he concentrated, he could, do well. And that makes total sense now that I know, now that we know.
The more you know.
Exactly. And there was never really anybody that had a direct correlation with a diagnosis or some type of additional need there. So that's something that I have to carry with me now, but we're trying to do things differently to make it better moving forward.
I think it's hard though, because if it's in your own home, it's different. You don't see the same things that you would at work. You're at work to pick up those things. If you're at home, you're there to be with your family, and you're switching off from work, and it's really hard to kind of step outside and observe objectively what's happening in your home. But also, I rolled my eyes at the whole teacher saying, if you just paid attention, because we've all heard it.
Yes.
Or we've all skated through because we were good at academic stuff.
Yes.
And then you weren't a problem, so we didn't do anything.
Exactly. That's been my experience. And retrospectively now, I'm sure our whole household is neurodiverse in some way. And that's through learning and awareness, and even for someone working in the field, it's still learning. Particularly, as you said, in your own home, it presents very different. My younger son's additional challenges were picked up because I was homeschooling him through COVID. So that was, again, another circumstance which was quite a lot more obvious to see. But it's not always as obvious in the home. People, kids are off doing their thing or playing games, hanging out with their friends. You don't see them in the same way.
You also see them grow up from birth. That's just how they are. And
yes, how they are, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that I had ADHD or autism or anything else, because I just thought everybody else had the exact same experience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned like now you're pretty sure everyone has neurodiversity in your house.
Yes.
Same with me. We do like to collect in flocks.
Yes, apparently so.
Yeah. We like to meet our people and get along with them. We have our neurokin. But I didn't know that that was different for anybody else. And so everyone that I knew around me just got that.
Yes.
And it's clear to see how you can kind of see neurodiverse blocks. And when one person gets diagnosed, it's a domino effect a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you're not a textbook presentation of these things, the academia and the research is not there to tell us what we should be looking for. But it sounds like your family were lucky that you were somewhat aware of it from your work and you picked it up in your younger son. And then you can support your family from that more knowledge perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Wrapping the supports around in those coming days were really critical. We were waiting for the mental health service to reach out. That call never came. So I think I was lucky that we knew who to reach out to in the community to get support as we needed to, which, I'm really grateful for. Not a lot of people, may have that knowledge or support as well.
That reminds me really strongly of an experience I went through where we fostered a family friend. And I remember saying repeatedly, I need help and I'm not sure what I'm doing. I need services. And I have a very strong justice sensitivity, dysphoria inside me.
Yeah.
But I know for me, I felt so strongly and so much anger that when I am crumbling or when my family needs the services that are there for us, I couldn't grapple with the fact that they weren't there and they weren't returning calls or anything like that. So do you want to tell me a bit about, like, you know, the lines to go to, you know how to advocate for it, but how did that actually feel? Did you feel alone?
Very much so. And even going back to when my son was in hospital, I remember really clearly there was two options from the psychiatrist. You either go home or you go into a psych ward. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. And how can someone that's in such a distressful situation make that choice, you know, and if they don't have someone there advocating for them, it's really tough. And the services are determined more around the person needing the direct support or the patient, if you like, which is rightly so, but there has been not very many sort of services for family members either. So when researching the book, I did a bit of a scope in our local area looking at services for people that have survived suicide. There's not much out there. So, you know, I've reached out and said, hey, how about this? And they've said, look, we could adapt this group for that cohort as well. So I think if anything else, I'm hopefully starting that conversation around looking at what other supports might need to be out there for family members or siblings or even people themselves that have gone through that experience and, you know, on the other side of it. But it's not easily sort of forthcoming around service provision.
I can't understand why there isn't support there.
Look, there probably is somewhere, but I couldn't find it in our local area. Yeah. And it's more focused for survivors of suicide or people that have lost loved ones, and then support groups for them. But not a real gap seems to exist for people that have made it through the other side of a suicide attempt or have supported people that have done that. Yeah, so there's not as much support that I could find out there.
So you just mentioned advocacy and you've mentioned it a couple of times. It's such a critical part of navigating through a mental health crisis. I know, like, if I just think about myself in terms of relating to this, if I'm overwhelmed and I'm not okay, I find it difficult to articulate what I need or to even work through the complete mess in my brain to know what the next step forward is. So I think your son is incredibly lucky that he had you there to be able to navigate that and to at least try to hear what the doctors are saying at the time. But I think it's a very common neurodivergent experience where some people even go nonverbal if they can't process what's happening or what they need to do. So do you think there's a gap in our mental health system around that advocacy piece and making sure people can actually access the things they need?
Yeah, I don't think it's sort of in the forefront of the mind when you present to hospital. And of course, the immediacy needs to be the incident that's happened. I mean, I think even back to my own experience as a carer in that circumstance, I couldn't verbalise what I needed. It was more just, let's help him, let's, you know, sort that out first. So there's a real gap. I was never once asked if I was okay or if I needed to talk to someone. And I don't think it comes to the forefront of a doctor's mind or, and that, I understand that. But now in retrospect, it would have been nice to say, you know, do you want to talk to someone or is there someone we can call for you? Or
I mean, had they had a social worker there or something, that could have been their job.
That wasn't offered, but potentially that could be an option.
I just got chills because I remember the part of your book where you wrote that you went to coffee with a friend and she asked you how you were and you just cried because no one had asked you that yet. And I, like, as I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, nobody asked you, but I can see how that happens when the immediacy of the mental health crisis takes the oxygen out of the air, basically. And you just
that was weeks and weeks and weeks later.
Yeah.
But no one, I think it was more, I wasn't crying because of what had happened. At the time, I was crying more because someone had actually asked me if I was okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to answer that.
I haven't stopped to think about it.
Yes, that's right.
Oh my gosh. All right, I have more questions about the ADHD side of things. So you did mention that he received an ADHD diagnosis. Do you want to talk about how that actually came about? Because a lot of neurodiverse people have gone through doctors and psychologists and stuff who get the diagnosis of depression or anxiety or sometimes bipolar. I've had friends who've been diagnosed with BPD. So I know there are a lot of times that neurodiverse people get misdiagnosed and it's not addressing the underlying issue. So how did this incident turn into a realization that your son's brain is different?
So as I said, the initial diagnosis with the GP was very, checklist sort of based, which is fine. And then he suggested to get some counselling, which my son thankfully was really open to, and he was happy for me to sit in on those sessions initially with him as well, which I was really grateful for. We actually engaged with a telehealth psychologist, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, but it was really wonderful. And she could obviously observe him, jiggling around and it's difficult to talk about your emotions at the best of times, particularly a 16-year-old boy at the time.
A teenage boy.
With a lady that's not really present in the room with you or that you've never met. And she had suggested that maybe we could consider seeking out an ADHD diagnosis. My son was really open to hearing her feedback, which was really great. But I was really worried about how he would cope with any type of label or diagnosis. Thankfully, we had a local paediatrician that we were connected with who wasn't actually taking any new patients, but because we'd already had a family link, he was happy to see him. So we went through that process, through the assessment process with the school, and my son was old enough to contribute to, completing a survey towards the diagnosis. And the paediatrician was amazing. Talked with him about the benefits of receiving a diagnosis or not. And that was really his choice as to whether he wanted to formally be diagnosed, if you like.
That's really good.
Was really impressed. And again, I was really worried about how he'd respond. But
you did mention in the book that tension.
Yes.
And I wrote it down, the fear that a diagnosis would define him and the relief of actually knowing how his brain works and what's happening.
Yeah.
And that is something that everybody grapples with, especially parents.
Yes.
Who go through that major change.
And I was a bit concerned because obviously he tried to hurt himself. I thought, if this label sort of presents in his mind as a negative thing, what would that mean? But the decision was kind of out of my control. The paediatrician sort of consulted directly with him and he wanted to know. So he got the ADHD diagnosis. He also talked to him about the choice of whether he wanted to explore medication or not. He did not. But I was just so surprised. He actually said, Mum, it actually helps me understand that my brain works differently. And it was reframing for him about, his experiences and why that may have been the case. And that link between, impulsivity and what had happened and potentially how he can engage in the world in a different way. So it turned out to be a really positive thing.
What a wise young man.
He really is amazing.
Yeah. He sounds it. And also, what an incredible thing to be able to say, I'm guessing relatively quickly after diagnosis.
Yeah.
I know, I was late diagnosed and I went through a huge period of grief around not knowing my brain and that I was different and that all these things that are hard shouldn't necessarily be that hard.
Yeah.
But to just be that age and go, this helps me. I know how my brain works. Incredible.
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but many, many months later, maybe even a year later, I said something to him. He goes, Mum, my brain works differently, doesn't it? And I'm like, oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. So it's kind of really given a little bit of context for him, which is really good.
Does he pull the traditional teenage thing of the excuse now of, I can't do the dishes, I've got ADHD?
I think that was always there, no matter what. It seems like our whole household has that same excuse, I think.
Okay, so no one does the dishes in your household because you've all got ADHD?
Yeah, well, we should just leave them there, shouldn't
we? Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So how would you now describe that tug of war? Do you still feel that fear around the label with him and that potentially it might still have negative repercussions or it might label him in front of other people? Or do you feel at peace with it and you're really, do you know what I mean? Is there still a tension?
Not so much. I think it's more of an awareness. I've said to him, as he's applied for jobs or is having some difficulties, with relationships, whatever, I've left it up to him to navigate that. If he wants to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. But, I say, do you think you need to let them know that you've got some other challenges? And most of the time he's worked his way around that. I think it's also helped give us sort of a name. So, if he's feeling overwhelmed or if I'm feeling overwhelmed, whatever it is, we can come back and say, look, sometimes when you're feeling like that, it could be related to this, or have you thought about something like, thought about this in a different way? So it's actually been a positive, I think, from my perspective. And I think it gives context for other family members as well. You've probably heard, oh, you're just lazy or you don't want to do this. Well, it's not. Yeah, I hear you. It's not actually about that at all.
Yeah.
Let's approach the conversation in a different way.
Yeah.
which has
Which
been
is
helpful.
so good.
Yeah.
And we at the pod, Bestie Callie and I, are huge advocates for a strengths-based approach to neurodiversity.
Exactly.
And taking advantage of all the things out there that are actually set up and created to help our brains, because we know that our brains don't operate well in the current structures of society and organizations and schools and things, which can be hugely demanding and hugely challenging. So if there are things out there that can help, why not access them? I think it's the more you know, the more you can work with it.
And I think it's helped build our relationship. So early on, and I still experience a lot of anxiety. He'll say, "Mum, what are you ringing me all the time for?" And I say, "Oh, sorry, it's just my anxiety." And he has some context to understand where I'm coming from. And I think it's also helped me advocate for my younger son as well. You know, in the school environment, it's sort of all of that awareness and learning that's helped us communicate better, I think.
Which can only be better for your whole family.
Definitely, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, then I'm really glad he got diagnosed.
I know, it is a gift. I mean, I always believe in looking at things to see what you can get from it. It's been a very big experience, but a really lovely one that has sort of made our relationship closer, but also, improved that communication, I think.
So if we look at schooling, for example, like we were just talking about, the school systems are not set up for neurodivergent brains. I think that is widely known and accepted by anyone who knows anything about neurodiversity. So you mentioned that your son has had to go through like a change period of changing school and stuff to make sure as things were settling down, you had that support in place and he was supported in how he needed. You also mentioned that your younger son you've been advocating and talking to the school about. So do you think there are things that you would like schools to know or parents to know about schooling that would help support someone through, say, a mental health crisis or a new diagnosis of neurodiversity?
So when this happened with my son, we decided together he left school not long after that and started working. He tells me later he was just desperate to get out of school, which, it was never his thing. Now I know why. Yeah. So I was really determined to try and make a difference for my younger son in his schooling experience. He doesn't like school either, but it's also about finding the right environment, I think. And it's not always a luxury afforded to everyone to try and find a different school that may suit your child's needs. I mean, I drive half an hour there and half an hour back twice a day to drop him to and from school, but it seems to be a school that is open and listens to parents, which is really... it's life-changing, rather than thinking they know everything about everything. So there's a 6-year difference between my two boys. I've had really great experience with primary schools and now secondary school where they have been open and willing to modify timetables or consider the individual's needs. So that's really, really good. Yeah, really great.
All right, there's hope out there, besties.
I think there is.
Schooling
there
things
is a little bit.
changing.
Yeah. And because I think I've got more confidence as a parent, funnily enough, that sounds quite ironic given my experience a couple of years ago. But as I've learned and found my voice again, I think that also helps. And not every parent can do that. I understand that too. But yeah, really advocating. What I learned most of all, Jayne, is that there's no linear pathway. I used to think, you go to school, high school, university, get a job. That whole journey's gone out of the window in my mind.
I think that was such an old school thing. Like I was raised in that gen too.
Yes.
And I'm going, what is this linear pathway? It's so different now.
Yeah, that's how I was sort of raised as well, that, you either work or go to school. That's it.
Yeah, there's no other option.
And it's working full-time. You must work full-time. And now it's like, well, you can work casually and part-time, which also is working really well for my son and how his brain functions, sleep patterns and all of those other things that come with his neurodiversity that we need to consider. I didn't know sort of about that before. So, I think schools are becoming a bit more aware of it and more willing, in my experience, to sort of talk about it and see how we can make things better.
So if you could design a school right now, what are the core things that you would make sure are in place or set up so that, neurodivergent people could thrive?
First thing that comes to my mind, and you probably have to ask my boys that have lots of ideas, but a balance between academic and practical learning. Being in a classroom all day does not sit well with my boys that need to sort of get up and move around, or those that learn with hands-on sort of learning. So the flexibility in the approach of how the day's structured would be a really big factor. Open spaces, just a little bit of freedom and choice around how people become educated, I think. Not the traditional classroom model. Doesn't work for everybody.
I'm sorry, what? This is crazy talk.
I know,
but we've always done it that way.
Exactly.
As someone who works in education or adult education in my
Yeah.
normal 9 to 5. I hard agree with that. The whole teacher as the hero model of education is just so outdated.
And getting the kids to be leading some of those conversations or leading classes with their interests. Amazing boost for confidence.
So good. Oh, I would love to see that in a school.
Yeah.
Just going back to the jobs thing that you mentioned. So I know when I was younger, I had no idea about my ADHD brain, but I was never sitting still.
Yeah.
And I had at one point 6 casual jobs at once.
Wow.
But I loved it. It kept my brain in a million places and doing fun things. And where one job was like in McCafe, I had another job as a balloon clown. And then I was...
diversity of skills as well.
Yeah. And I was an actor and I got to do lots of creative fun things and be out in the community and work with kids and things like that. So I think there's a lot of power in this gig economy for neurodivergent people to really find and explore and try a whole bunch of different things. So on that nonlinear pathway, it's not the end. It's not something bad.
Yes.
I fell into this weird career that I've got that's completely insane, but I love that I did that through exploring a whole bunch of different things.
And not the traditional 9 to 5. That doesn't suit everybody. You know, it might be a 12 till 6 or, you know, just I've really sort of, taken down all of those traditional perspectives that I might have had once upon a time and, just throw them out the window.
It is hard to dismantle those, though.
It is, especially when you've been brought up in that environment.
Yeah.
You know, you must work hard, and working hard is equal to the value that you bring to, to community. Yeah, it's not about that at all anymore.
And if you work hard, you'll be rewarded for it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work like that either.
No.
Yeah.
And it's hard to dismantle that traditional systems of organizations and things, I would say. I don't know about you, but I go into my workplace and I am the one screaming the loudest for change.
Yeah.
And I'm the one going, I will live by example and I will do things that completely fly in the face of the traditional work system.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the older managers and the older employees kind of just look at it and go, what are you doing? This is not work.
Yeah.
This is not how we work. This is not how we school. So,
exactly.
I mean, you're doing really good work advocating for it and living by it.
Breaking down my own perspectives as well, which I think writing the book really demonstrated that there's so many other options, so many other pathways for kids, children's, adult, it's, really good.
You just used the words breaking down your own perspective, which I had to write down so I didn't forget.
Yeah.
But if you think about that and challenging what you knew previously, as you were writing the book, were there any passages from your journals or anything that you were reminded of that surprised you or shocked you, or you went, I can't believe I've changed on that so much, or does anything jump out?
I still feel sort of shocked when I look at the book now. Not specifically for that, but it's almost like I wrote it and not forgot about it, but I reread it, and I think, yeah, I remember that now. Or I've included in the book a lot of letters that I wrote. So one of the things I like to do in my journaling is write unsent letters. So it might be to people, it might be to the mental health system, it could be to things. I actually have written a letter to my journal, as crazy as that sounds. And to grief and all of those other things, feelings. I reread that now and I think, oh my goodness, was I really thinking that at the time? Or, wow, I've learnt so much since I wrote that. It's surprising.
I love that. It's like your own resource for yourself going forward.
I know, I read it the other day. I'm like, wow. I actually wrote that. It's funny because you sort of, and it was quite an emotional time to write it as well, because I had to relive all of those things at different times. And it took me a long time to write it. I wrote it a couple of times and I came back and scrapped the whole thing and started again. So it's sort of like a gift that keeps on giving. I keep reading it going, that's not bad actually.
I must say the letters are my favorite part of the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because whilst the book itself takes you through the narrative and it gives you the context and things, I read the letters and I feel like it's me writing it.
Oh.
I don't know why, but that is how I connected with the book.
Really?
And the letters, like the one you wrote to grief, it just shook me. I was like,
me too.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can imagine looking back at it being emotional from it.
Yeah. And I had a friend that really was kind enough to edit the first kind of 3 copies, and she knows me very well, obviously. And even at the time she'd say, oh, but this has happened in your life and I can see a correlation between this and that, particularly around the grief. And we'd lost a baby in 2021. And she said, well, thinking about that experience and then the grief that you're experiencing here. And I went, oh, That's brilliant. I'm going to go write a chapter on that. So, to have someone trusted that knows you, that can sort of give you additional input, it's amazing how many things sort of all came together in writing the book and all kind of interrelated. So, yeah, I'm so pleased to write the letters. That's
they're
awesome.
my favorite. They're good.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry to hear about the baby in 2021.
Oh, thank you.
That is awful.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to read the book to know about it, but it
No
talks a
spoilers.
little bit about, the grief of, it was an in utero pregnancy loss, but then people sort of understand that kind of grief. Whereas if someone, survives a suicide and then the family don't really know what to say or how to deal with that. But interesting, in the book that I kind of, sort of reflect on both of those things. So
this really shows how poor my memory is, because I read the book.
There's so much in the book.
And I forgot until you just mentioned
yes.
that comparison.
Yes.
And it is so well articulated that you're right. The grief around the loss of the baby is something people know. And it's not commonly talked about, but it is something that most women and families and people have experience with.
I can understand that.
And can
more.
understand.
Yes.
But the grief around an attempted suicide or surviving suicide, and even the grief around a diagnosis of neurodiversity, these are things that people don't understand until you get put in that situation and you are faced with it.
Yeah. And then all the subsequent grief, I call it living grief, all the things that could have been or should have been or may have been, bring up grief at different times as well.
Which is immense. Do you feel like your family is still going through a period of grief from the diagnosis and things that are happening?
Probably not more, probably more just, it's an interesting question. I think I'm personally, like, for example, when my son's mates graduated high school, I grieve that because I'm like, I'm never going to, have that experience, not just for myself, but for him. So it comes up at different times in different ways and sometimes not expected at all. So I think it's improving though.
Have you ever heard the analogy of grief as a big ball in your stomach? Okay, so if I explain it to everyone as quickly as possible, this is the concept that you have your stomach inside that feels things, and if you feel grief, it's like a giant ball in there, and there's a button inside your stomach, and
it rises.
Anytime you move, the ball hits the button, and so you just feel overwhelmed by grief constantly. But as time progresses, the ball grows smaller and smaller. It shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Because time does heal, but it will still be bouncing around inside your stomach, and it will hit that grief button at certain times.
Makes
so,
sense.
That concept of your son not being able to graduate, although I will say graduations are incredibly boring.
And it didn't bother him at all, mind you.
Okay, I didn't go to my uni one. But apart from that, those moments of grief that you don't anticipate will come up, I think they will happen forever. And I know I still experience it with the neurodiversity thing, where certain things happen and I just go, oh my God, that was so hard in my life for this reason. And I had no idea. And why was that not picked up? And I feel so intensely about it at times. So it's with mental health, it's going to be such a journey that will trigger and go over things again in your head. So how do you find being able to support yourself and cope with an ongoing journey through this mental health issue or challenge? I don't want to say issue because it's not an issue.
It rises every now and then, doesn't it? And sometimes it's more prominent than others, both my own mental health and other people in the family too. So I kind of think I'm getting a little bit better at recognising the signs of it, or I'm more aware of what to look for now.
Okay.
Or particularly in myself, for example, I know if I'm feeling anxious and I'm able to name why it is. Whereas before I was feeling like that all the time. I didn't actually know why. So I do talk to myself a lot.
That's normal, and I won't hear anything otherwise.
I appreciate that. It's probably more recognising it and taking steps to make yourself feel better as you get to learn yourself or get to know yourself a bit more as well.
Amazing. You might have just heard my stomach rumble because I may or may not have forgotten to have lunch. Classic ADHD move on that one. I will ask, the book's title is a question. So who are you anyway? Has your answer to that changed? Do you have an answer to that? Do you use it as a reflective prompt?
I think I'm evolving.
Okay.
I think the title of the book was named that because that's what kept coming up for me all the time. I think I'm moving more towards an authentic answer. I think I'm becoming my more it sounds a bit strange, more authentic self as a result of this. For example, I stopped dyeing my hair. I made some more definitive decisions about the relationships I want to have in my life. I feel like I found my passion and my purpose, I guess, in a way, around storytelling and sharing, whether it's my writing or having conversations. So, yeah, I don't know if I've found the answer yet, but I'm keeping it open.
You're on the path.
I'm on the path, yes.
If I want to use a word that's way overused, you're on a journey.
Yes, love the J word, yeah.
This has been such a massive journey. Again, I'm going to use that word.
I use journey on the front cover of the book. It's okay.
Amazing.
It's all right. It's okay.
That's where I picked it up from clearly when I was looking at it earlier. Such a massive journey for you and your whole family, your son that went through this mental health crisis. What would you say to a parent who is going through what you faced? What was it, 5 years ago?
3 years ago. Almost coming up to 3. Mm-hmm.
Oof, that feels not long ago at all.
I know.
What would you say to someone who is potentially at that early stages of a mental health crisis, or suddenly something's happened with their teen or their kid and they just go, holy hell, I have no idea what to do and I feel alone?
2 things come to mind. I write about it in the book, but I almost got a tattoo that said, don't freak out.
100% on board for this. You should definitely do it.
I think I need it on my forehead, really. That was really, really important. I said that so many times to myself, and I still do. If something's overwhelming, I'm just don't freak out, because it's really, even if you're masking and pretending, it's showing your teen or whoever it is that you've totally got it. So just fake it till you make it, but really believe those words and be kind to yourself. And if you can just jot a couple of things down each day, it really just helps your brain put things on paper, things that you may not remember. You might need to come back to that, whether it's for doctor's appointments, whether it's for your own reflection. Yeah, be kind to yourself. Don't freak out and just write something down. It can help just clear your mind a little bit. And sometimes it's day by day.
So as someone who struggles with journaling, because I look at a blank page and I get completely overwhelmed.
You freak out?
I do. And maybe the tism in me kind of goes, but to write a diary, you have to go, dear diary, today I ate cereal for breakfast.
Yeah.
I struggle with journaling because of that. So what would you recommend to me or any of my neurodiverse besties who potentially don't necessarily know how to journal?
It can literally be 5 minutes a day. And it could be as simple as starting with a sentence, today I feel this, and fill in the gap. That may be it. There's so many resources online just to look up journaling prompts. And what I've done sometimes when I'm in the mood, you've got a blank book or a notebook, actually go and just write the start of those sentences on each page. So when you get 5 minutes or you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or you want to jot something down, you go into a notebook that has writing already on the page. So it's not so overwhelming, because I feel exactly the same way. Or as I said, it might be just 3 things you're grateful for that day. It doesn't have to be extensive. It can really start small.
I love that. I've also started using oracle cards as like a prompt.
Yes, lovely.
It will give me something to think about and relate to my day, and then I can write about that. So if there are things, like you said, put your own prompts on the page, like that would immensely help my brain to not start with Dear Diary, this is Jayne.
Yeah. There's various, social media accounts that give you a daily prompt. You can take or leave them if you want. But yeah, it gives you and once you start writing, sometimes you just want to keep writing.
Yeah.
Or you might just write 1 or 2 lines, and that's fine as well.
Well, as someone who shares your complete overwhelm of a blank page, I'm even more impressed that you wrote an entire book. Congratulations.
Thank you. Sometimes I don't know how it happened, but Jayne, all I want to do is write now. I just want to write and write.
Well, I hope you keep writing. Have you got other books in the pipeline?
I may.
Ooh.
I've actually I've got a couple of more ideas, but I've got to sort of rein them in a little bit. But I'll give you an exclusive scoop. On the weekend, I started writing the second book.
Oh my gosh, you heard it here first, besties.
Have not shared that with anyone else.
Oh my goodness. Can we know anything else about it?
Well, it's kind of related. So with this book, what I've done is committed myself to having 100 conversations in the next 12 months about, not just about the book, but themes in the book, or, whatever that looks like. And then what I'm doing for the second book, or this is the idea of it at this stage, because I haven't totally worked it all out, but is using those conversations to reflect on human connection. Why is conversation so important? Why do we find conversation so difficult? So I'm just sort of exploring that concept at the moment. But what I want to do is invite the reader into that book. So the idea again, it's still being worked through, is that I use some of those conversations as reflection pieces and then have journaling prompts or invite the reader to continue that conversation in their own life.
Amazing.
Fingers
This sounds
crossed.
great.
Yes, hopefully.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that we got the sneaky
You got the scoop.
preview.
Yeah.
And what number conversation are we?
This is number 6.
Oh, people, we are in the top 10
Yes.
and I am pleased with that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
I would strongly encourage all of our besties to read Sarah's book, So Who Are You Anyway? How can they get access to your book?
So it's on Amazon. Or if you'd like to go to my website, you can get it there as well. So intentionalwritingforwellness.com.
Perfect.
Thank
and we
you.
will link that in the show notes as well. We are going to leave it there because we have run out of time, although I could talk to Sarah forever.
Yes.
But for now, if you are listening, please like and follow us. If you have any questions or feedback, or you would like to get in touch with Sarah or anything, please reach out to us at fthemfish@gmail.com or any of our socials, and we will write back to you because we love chatting with our besties. And I want to always have those connections. Maybe I will have 100 conversations. I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe we'll have to book in another one.
Maybe we will. I'll do that. But I'm not good at having conversations, so I won't have 100 conversations.
I'll bring you some prompts.
Okay, great. Thank you. I need them. All right, besties, have a really great week. We are so grateful to have you here, and we'll see you soon. Bye.